Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Mark Morton from Lamb of God. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. Doing well. How are you? Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and talk a little bit about your solo stuff and also a little bit about the upcoming album from Lamb of God.
My pleasure.
First, let's start off with your solo record, Anesthetic. How long was that album in the making?
Well, a long time, really. I think, honestly, those songs were starting to come together before I even really realized I was making a solo album. Just kind of in the process of writing material in general, I found myself coming up with songs that weren't really in the lane of what Lamb of God does creatively, musically, but I still felt like they were pretty inspired, pretty cool song ideas. So as those started collecting and kind of piling up, I played them for my producer Josh Wilbur, and he agreed that they were worth exploring and worth developing, and that's where that started. So I think when we started the project, when we started doing like official demos for the solo album, I had probably 5, 6, maybe 7 song ideas already put together just in the process of writing material.
How much did you learn about yourself during that process?
That's a good question. I learned that I'm a little more resilient than I maybe would have given myself credit for, because it's a lot of work to do that. And I don't say that complaining. It's more that I always felt like I knew what goes into making an album, and I do, but I knew it in the context of doing that in a band as sort of an active contributor and an active, very engaged and involved member of a band. But when you're doing it with your name on it, there's so many little decisions and so many variables and so many details that I feel like I didn't necessarily realize were there. So that was it gave me a new appreciation for all that goes into making an album.
It's almost the difference between being an individual sport versus a team sport, I would assume.
Yeah, probably so. Lamb of God is definitely very much a team sport. I mean, honestly, the solo stuff is too, but it's my name on it, so I'm sort of the creative director, and ultimately everything has to flow through me in that project and at least get my approval or be something that I'm aware of or cognizant of. So yeah, it's a big undertaking. One I really enjoy and really value having the opportunity to do.
Was either the leftover tracks that you couldn't find a way to fit them into Anesthetic, or you always had the plan to have these two separate releases?
Yeah, neither. It's a good question. It would seem so, just given on the timing of the releases. But I really had no anticipation of releasing Ether, and there was no keepable material left over from Anesthetic. I mean, there were some ideas that didn't get really fully developed because they weren't quite up to par. So there wasn't anything I was really considering or hanging on to. The Ether really arose out of some shows that I did for Anesthetic in support of Anesthetic that were acoustic based, just opportunities I got at the at Sonic Temple Festival and also a Download in the UK, and played these acoustic sets and really kind of got into the vibe of reinterpreting those songs as acoustic. And it sort of was the catalyst for maybe I should write some solo material that is more acoustic generated. And that is really what turned into Ether. So really the two projects are very different because Anesthetic, as I was saying, was written over the course of several years of compiling material and jumping in and out of the studio in between Lamb of God commitments. Whereas Ether was just the idea. I got the idea. I got all the management, financial stuff in place, and I just wrote for it like within. I think all of there's 2 covers on there, but all of the 3 originals on there were written in a matter of a couple months with that project in mind. So very different approaches. Also kind of different too, because as I said, with Anesthetic, the incubation period was so long that I had a lot of time to sit with the stuff. Whereas with Ether, I really had to commit and just kind of trust my artistry and trust the people I was working with. And it was a different kind of thing. Just go for it. Yeah. But both very, very rewarding endeavors, and really enjoyed the process of both of them.
I'm a pretty lucky guy. I got to see you in Toronto with Lamb of God when you guys were on tour with Slayer. I got to see you in Toronto supporting your own record with Anesthetic when you were on that tour. So I got to see you twice in both on both sides, perhaps, of the coin. That is Mark Morton. Now having the experience of in doing tours with Lamb of God and doing a tour where you're supporting your own personal material, How does that feel? How does that compare? How do you compare notes between the two experiences?
Yeah, good question. With Lamb, it's something that I've been doing for a long time, so it's very I'm very accustomed to it. It's the same a lot of the time, the way our organization works, the people we have around us, the people that work with us. So it's a very familiar setting. A lot of the venues, like where you saw us, I've been to before, played a number of times, and there's comfort in that, and that's cool. But I know what to expect with the solo stuff. Smaller audiences, smaller venues, and it just brings me back to, I guess, to some degree, the early days of Lamb. And there's just also this kind of new level of exposure. I'll tell you the truth. The first show I did for the Anesthetic album, the first show of that tour that you saw that you're referencing, was here in Richmond, Virginia, at a club that I'd never played before because it was a little newer, but I'd been to before. And I saw my name on the marquee and I almost threw up because I'm just really like not used to being the attraction. That's right. And that took some getting used to for me. And I don't know that I'm entirely there yet. And I'm not the front man of the band. I don't sing in the live shows, but it still feels like a different kind of thing, a different level of exposure. I really want the show I always want the show to go well, but with Lamb, it's just more of a well-oiled machine. And with this, I had a new band. I'd never played a show as Mark Morton before. So that show you saw in Toronto was a great show. I remember on the solo tour, both those shows, even the Lamb and Slayer show was as well. But I distinctly remember that show in Toronto that you're talking about. And it was a really, really exciting night.
You may not be the front man, but you realize when people came to see you, they came to see you.
Well, hopefully they walked away feeling like they saw a band because, it is my solo project and it's my name on the banner, but we had a pretty hitting little band there.
Yeah, I was hyped to see Doc Coyle. He's a friend of mine. I didn't even know he was on the tour. I didn't even know he was on the band until you guys hit the stage.
Yeah, we put a great band together. Doc's been a friend of mine, and he's filled in for me in Lamb of God on a couple tours when I had personal commitments to attend to. So he's a great friend, phenomenal guitar player, and I'm really, really proud of him and his success with all of his endeavors. But lately, he's been real busy working, playing that guitar, and I'm proud of him.
Changing gears a little bit, I want to talk to you a little bit about the new Lamb of God album. I got it yesterday, and I've been playing it ever since. Did you guys take a different creative approach with this album?
No, we really didn't. It had been 5 years since we released an album, so it's been quite a break in terms of having new material recorded and released. But the process is really the same. It's me and Willie writing riffs and putting song structures together. And then primarily Randy and me a little bit helping here and there, writing lyrics out to those riffs. So, obviously there's, we changed drummers, and there was, that certainly had an impact I think in the energy, in the room but it, in terms of the song structures and the compositions, the process wasn't any different. I feel like the addition of Art brings a kind of a fresh energy into the band. I think, it's worth mentioning that he's about 15 years younger than, at least, than the rest of us. So he is very excited. His eyes and ears are wide open. He's very grateful to be in the position he is, and he works really, really hard. And on top of that, and honestly, first and foremost, he's just a phenomenal drummer. So fortunately, we had almost 2 years of touring before we got into the studio to really get into our own groove and I want to say Chris Adler is an incredibly talented guy and an amazing drummer in his own right, very creative cat. So I'm proud of all the work we did with Chris, and those are big shoes to fill. But Art is just so technical. His technical ability and his just intuition as a player and his nuance is really a thrill to work with him. I'm really proud he's in our band.
I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm going to really measure my words because I don't want to say that you guys sound like Pantera when the song had more of a Testament-style riff. I know how you feel about that. I follow on social media. I've seen the comments. Listening to this album, two things about the guitars that I really want to ask you. One, it felt to me that they had a lot of volume together. They just felt like they had this really strong presence, this really strong sound. And then the other part of it is I felt there was some Slayer-esque influences into some songs. Would you agree with that, or I'm like the guy that said that the song sounded like Pantera?
Well, I'm not so mad at that guy. Sometimes I go on little social media rants that are just more for entertainment of their own right. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we have absolutely a Pantera influence, and we have a Slayer influence, and we have a Testament influence. I mean, if you ask me who are the top 5 influences on our band, those 3 would be on the list. So I think what you're saying has merit, and I think, yeah, for sure, there's a Slayer influence. I think there has been. But perhaps subconsciously it's a little gassed up since we've been on tour with them for a year and a half. That's possible. It's not a conscientious discussion, but it would stand to reason. And I honestly, I think Pantera defined the sound of what we call metal today. You know, it's not certainly Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and Slayer and all those bands. You know, all of our predecessors, all of the giants. You know, so it's not a better or worse or dig. But in terms of like what the modern metal bands you hear today, I think that Pantera sound, the later sound, you know, from you know, really from Cowboys, but definitely from the albums after that. To me, that really set the standard for what happened with the new wave of American heavy metal and that kind of thing. So I'm not offended when someone compares us to Pantera. My point is when people say we sound like Pantera, I sort of get snippy. I'm like, what song? What song sounds like Pantera? Because if you tell me Laid to Rest sounds like Into the Pit by Testament, you're 100% right. But if you tell me you guys just rip off Pantera, I want to know what song you're talking about, because Pantera is a massive influence. But
this is why I was measuring my words. You know what I mean? Like I want to make sure we stay cool with each other. You know what I mean?
We're cool, man. We're cool.
One of my favorite songs on the album is Poison Dream, and you guys got Jamie Jasta on it. That song to me had a little bit of Hatebreed in it. Obviously, when you have Jamie Jasta on vocals on a track, you're going to have a little bit of that hardcore feel to it in the way the song is structured. The opening riff is where I got a little bit of a Slayer vibe in the way it sounded a little bit. So it kind of had perhaps the DNA of Lamb of God, but it also had the influence of Hatebreed. How did that song come together?
Yeah, that hardcore influence that you'll hear sometimes in the band, and that song is a perfect example, are usually, and this one was a very Willie Adler-driven song. He has a lot of history with hardcore music. He's a fan of it. I certainly love and respect great hardcore bands, but it wasn't really part of my sort of DNA coming up as a player. It wasn't that genre, that specific style of heavy music wasn't a cornerstone for me in my sort of developing as a player, but it was for Willie. So that's an example of you hearing that, you know, that Willie Adler kind of hardcore influence coming out into Lamb of God. And that's really what we are, man. It's just this kind of conglomeration of our individual influences. I mean, I think that probably applies to any collaborative band. And so, you know, what you're hearing there is Willie and Randy as well, having that kind of punk hardcore history, just as a fan, as the type of bands he grew up listening to and loving. Jamie Joseph is family, you know what I mean? He's a brother to all of us, very close friend to me and to Randy and to Willie, you know, to all of us. So, you know, the Hatebreed camp, the Lamb of God camp, the Testament camp family, I mean, we're all family. You know, it's bigger than just, hey, do you want to guest feature on this song? It's like, those are our brothers. And so it was really natural for a couple of reasons. One, just because of the personal relationships, but also as you noted, as you heard, this kind of style and sound of that song just seemed really appropriate for Jamie.
You guys labeled the album, well, named the album self-titled, 8th album in the band's career, self-titled. You really put the hammer down with this record. Is this one of those albums that you feel that kind of encapsulates the history of the band and then resets it for what's coming in the future?
I do. I love that you sum it up like that, because I do feel like this album probably more than any, and maybe just because of where it's kind of come sequentially, but it really does sort of, I guess, pull in all different eras of the band. I think there are songs that reference kind of the sound, style, and energy of all the different albums across the discography. But it does so. It sounds like one of the stock answers, but I really believe this. But it does so in a very modern way. I mean, I think it's undeniable that lyrically this album is very current, very topical. Randy's talking about school shootings and climate change, and politically this album's fierce and kind of unabashed in that sense. And that particular thing was, something to, I guess, just a point of notice for us. Like, how hard do we want to go there? And we went like we always went, where we have always been ourselves. We've always been very honest creatively, very genuine as a band, and we continue to do so. So we didn't mute or delete. We just gave you an honest portrayal of who we are, and that changes and it evolves. And I mean, I'm getting attacked, murder hornets. We as a band can't decide what kind of pizza we want to order, so it's usually a process to like decide when a song is done or what we want to do with it. But I've come to really enjoy that process.
I only have one more question for you. I really don't want to take too much of your time. So since you've mentioned the political aspect of the record and how current it is, you're one of the most outspoken voices in social media about what happens in the world, what's happening in your own home country. You never hide away from talking about tough subjects. Do you feel like it's important for you to use the platform that you have to create awareness to the things that are happening around you?
I'm starting to. I've been pretty vocal and I guess at times controversial, I guess. I mean, it's its own little bubble. And if you would have asked me this a couple of years ago, I would have said that it's not important. It's just kind of what I do. But I'm starting to wonder if it's not important, because when things are when something's really wrong, or there's a discussion not being had, or there's something being ignored, I have a platform. And I have a platform in our music and what we talk about lyrically, and social media, for better or worse, is a platform. I don't know if it's the best one, but it is one, and it's one I engage in. So I do speak my mind, and I try to be open to other people's opinions and the fact that not everyone's going to agree with me. I don't think my opinions can be put into a tight, neat little box, because there are things that I'm very liberal on, and things I'm very conservative on, and things that I'm in the middle on. But lately, particularly the last week or so, I've had a hard time keeping my mouth shut, and I don't make any apologies for that.
You got frozen in time. We had some technical issues, but
we're back.
We got you back. Just to finish off the point, I wanted to say that I really appreciate you being so vocal on social media, using the platform you have, even if perhaps you don't mean to do it, because I feel like it's important for us to see the real you, so that you're not just a musician, you're a person, and as a person you have your own thoughts, you believe in your own things, and we cannot put you in a bubble. We cannot say to you, just play music and be quiet about everything else. You know what I mean? Because that's not possible. You know what I mean? Like, we're all people, right? So you're a musician. I'm an office manager. We have our jobs, but outside of our jobs, we have our opinions, and we're free to express them.
Yeah, but I mean, look, if I had a nickel for every time someone told me on social media to just shut up and play guitar, I always actually take it as a compliment, because I'm like, no matter how mad I made them, they're still saying that it's worthwhile for me to play guitar. So I'm doing something right. That's a compliment to me.
At least they're still going to buy your album.
Yeah. Well, so far we'll see. I don't know, but I've been pretty vocal this week. But yeah, man, it's I get to have an opinion too, I just do. Everybody does. And, you know, hopefully we can all start learning to respect each other's opinion and even maybe find some common ground, because a lot of that seems to be getting overlooked lately. And I hope we can get back plugged into that.
Yeah, my mother used to say the best place in your bed is in the middle. So if somebody's pulling the covers, if you're in the middle, you're always covered. And I find that these days everybody's either on one side of the bed or on the other side of the bed, and when one pulls, the other one becomes uncovered, and it's this tag of war back and forth. That's kind of the world we're living in now. So
It sure is. I like that analogy from your mother. That's a good one. But yeah, I mean, it's a trying time, man. There's so much going on, and everybody's really really tense and anxious, and there's a lot of fear and a lot of anger. And I don't know what to do except to talk about when I see something that's wrong, and you know, I'm not always great at not riling it up. Sometimes I'm venting in anger myself. I'm a human being, but I'm trying to be a little more positive as I go. So that's all I can do, man.
well, keep being you, keep doing you. I really enjoy following you on social media. Like I said, it gives me a glimpse behind the musician, and that to me is always something that I welcome, regardless if I agree with the opinion or not. I think that's important for us to see Mark Morton unmasked, if you will. So thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate talking to you. Best of luck with the new album coming out with Lamb of God, June 19th on Epic Records. Go pick it up. Don't illegally download it. Don't be a punk. Just go pick it up. Support these guys. They can't tour right now. Everybody's quarantined, so go out there, pick up the record, support these guys. It's a great album. Congratulations and best of luck.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your thoughtful question.
Thank you.
Take care.